All right, good morning, everybody. There's a whole lot to cover, as Janice said, and I didn't get to half of it, honestly. We're not going to make it dangerous in 30 minutes or even teach you all of it. So I'm going to rip through the slides, give you an idea where things are, give you advice from people who've talked about HTML5 before, and give you a lot of resources to go to. First thing is, HTML5 is not a big scary thing. It's very easy. A lot of what you have in your HTML pages continues to work in HTML5. There's improvements you can make. They're small, they're easy, and it's not going anywhere. So it's not that hard. The first thing to know is HTML5 is made up of 3 joint things. It's HTML plus CSS plus JavaScript. We're going to cover, this is what we're going to cover. We're going to cover a lot of the HTML syntax because there's old stuff, there's new stuff, and we don't always use all the elements correctly. Haven't in the past. I know I haven't. There's microdata annotations. That's something else that's part of this, sort of partly syntax, sort of not. There's CSS we're going to cover. We're going to cover JavaScript, and we're going to cover one of the big features, which is local storage. Okay, so we're going to start HTML syntax. HTML and XML syntax, they're essentially the same. It is recommended, however, that if you're writing HTML, you use HTML syntax and not XML syntax. The reason is it mostly has to do with history and browsers, browser wars, and how different browsers interpret things. It doesn't matter really what the spec says. It depends on how the browser interprets it and how the people who write the browsers make things happen. And it seems really weird, but it's completely true. And for a doc type, you want to use simple, the HTML5 doc type declaration, which is strictly doc type HTML. Don't use any of the others unless you want a browser to enforce certain things. If you use XHTML and you declare the entire doc type, the browser will hold you to exactly the letter of the spec. You cannot slide in any way from it. And you should know that most browsers have the history of web publishing in mind when they are constructed. So they mostly let a lot of things slide because over the time people have enforced that stuff, just having an open tag without a close tag, for example. So if you want to use XML, use the XML declaration at the top, but use the HTML doc type. And that's really enough to get the browser to do the right thing. So one of the things always to keep in mind is things like escaping. Always be careful about the magic characters, and especially careful if you're having your user submit data to you through a form or something else, because all that stuff is part of the same package and parcel. Okay, so metadata elements. One thing that a lot of people forget is that the page title is required, and it is this value that search engines use when they produce search results. So title is extremely important. These are metadata elements in the HTML page. Meta and link, they're void elements. They don't have end tags. Meta is for plain text data, and linked is for external resources. They're similar to script and style. Script is JavaScript, and style is CSS. These are inline definitions rather than external ones, although they can also be external. One thing to know is that type and language on these 2 elements are not required, and the browser will do the right thing. It'll just do what it's going to do. CSS is style, JavaScript is script. And if you have script that also has a source attribute, it's going to ignore everything that's between the tags. So one of those things to keep in mind. All right, page organization elements. There's a whole set of these. We're going to go through these kind of quick. HTML head and body. These tags are truly, they're optional, or if you omit them, if you forget to put them in, the browser will do it for you, and it'll do it however it wants, so you should always have them there. HTML is the root element. It must have head and body, and it only has those 2 children. Head has metadata, body has all your visible content. There is a main element. This is used for screen readers, people who are not, who are visually impaired or audibly impaired. This is for screen readers. So you use it once on a page and you skip everything else. This is for the main content for them. Header and footer is not just for the body. It is not the same as head, and a footer, as we're thinking about the bottom of your page, that's not necessarily what the footer is. The footer applies to the nearest sectioning element, so you can use it in a section, you can use it in an attribution, you can use it in a block quote, I don't remember. but all of these things, it's mostly information about the section or part of the document. Head 1 to 6, these are the hierarchical headings and subheadings. There's a new element in HTML5 called nav, because as over the years they discovered everybody has navigation, so why don't we just call it nav, and like in the browsers and the search engines and the crawlers can all know this is navigation data, and it shows page linking within the document as well as to other documents. Use nav only for primary navigation. Don't use it for other things because that's really not what it's for, and it'll only confuse search engines. There is a new address element also. You can use it for contact information. If it's in the body element of the page, then it applies to the entire page. It is not just an address. If you're listing a bunch of addresses for people who are in your knitting group, this is not going to, the first one it picks up will be the one for the page, so you might want to wrap that in something else. All right, so more page organization elements. Article, section, and div. Article and section are new. Here is the difference. Article is an independent, self-contained section of page intended to be distributable, like syndication. Think of this as, an article that's written that's part of the page. It's not really the page itself. Section is a thematic grouping of content. It usually has a header and footer. Think of this like chapters in a book or numbers in a thesis, numbered sections, right? Div is still around, even though you have section and article. It has no meaning whatsoever. Div is used strictly for structure and is something to which you can attach CSS properties and do things with it. When to use it, here's your keys. Article, if it makes sense on its own, it can stand by itself. That's an article. If it's a section, if it's related to other sections on the page. Div, if there's absolutely no semantic meaning to it whatsoever. Okay, here I got nav again. I guess I didn't remove that to the other page. And then there's something called an aside. An aside is like article, section, and div, only it's something that's tangentially related. So think of it as top links for this page, or top related things, or something that is just added information, but it's not essential to the page itself or the information presented therein. Here's your typical content grouping elements. None of these are new, but sometimes it's nice to be reminded what everything stands for. It's description list, not definition list. Description title and description definition. Pre is used to preserve white space. You can preserve both the white space in like a code listing, but you could also preserve white space that a user enters into something else. One of the other changes here is HR. HR is sort of had a little redefinition with HTML5. It represents a thematic break. It is often really not used at all and replaced simply with CSS to put in an image or a line underneath a section, for example. HR is one of those things that seems to be kind of falling out of favor a little bit because you can do everything that it used to do with CSS. It is not something to break up your sections. It's really supposed to be used. Think of HR as a break in the prose or a break in like a poetry set of content. It's not something that really separates sections. You do that by adding the border property to section if you want it to break a section. You don't use HR for that. Other content grouping elements. Block code has had a little bit of changes. It's now got child elements, footer, cite, right? So you can have a footer to the quote. This is really for quotations from other sources. Block quote is not just to make things indent and be straight. Like that's not what it's for. It is really a quotation from somewhere else, and you should use it with cite and footer so that you can have a reference to the resource being quoted. It is a sectioning element, so if it has headers in your quote, it's not going to mess up the organization for your page because it's self-contained within the block quote group. Figure and fig caption. Figures are used to kind of in the old sense of a floating graphic in print. The figure is a thing that is relative content, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in a particular place. For example, you can move a figure to another column, you can move it to another part of the page and say, see the figure, over there. You have a cross-reference and there's the figure. So it's not necessarily, the location is not essential, but the content of it is. Don't confuse figure with aside. Aside means the content is related, but it is not essential. A figure is essential, but its location is not. All right, so here's our text level elements, moving farther down into our discussion. These are things that are not new. These have been around for a long time. Some that most people don't really use very often is you'll see code a lot, but you very rarely see var, keyboard, and sample. For specifically what they are, user input, sample output, BDI and BDO, which have to do with directional formatting of the child elements. It's kind of a wrapper. And in the BDI's case, you want to isolate this text so it can be treated bidirectionally by styling and other JavaScript interpretations. BDO says, I'm setting the text directionality, don't mess with it, and all the child elements apply to the same direction. Subscript and superscript, we've all seen these and know what they are. Q is for phrasing content. It's kind of like the PH tag in Dida. And cite is not really new, but it hasn't really been used in the past very often. It is information about the cited element. Remember back to block quote when we were talking about, the citation, the reference material about the quote itself. And that can be used there and other places. This one I wanted to call out on purpose. Emphasis, strong, italics, bold, and mark, and other various semantics like this. There are differences between them. They are not the same, and you should not use them for the same purposes. EM is emphasis. Strong is importance. Mark is something that's highlighted. It's like editor added emphasis, right? Where you're trying to highlight something about the text that is important to the reader and to the editor, like you're calling out something that says, oh, well, they were bound to fail, and you see this article that was written 10 years ago that says they were bound to fail, and yet 10 years later, the prediction is completely untrue, right? So you want to call out that bound to fail, and you want to highlight it, but it's editor adding that highlight because the original author didn't have it. You use mark for that. IMB, italicize and bold. These do not convey semantic meaning. They're strictly italicized and bold. You only use these when you're not otherwise covered by an HTML element. Don't use EM to italicize. Don't use I just to add italics for symbolic purposes. Use CSS for that. The same advice applies to bold and strong, and make sure mark is only for highlighting relevance, because that's what they're for. Halfway through. All right, some other textile elements. We all know BR, that's line break. It's really, in HTML5, they're really trying to tell you don't use this to separate paragraphs. This is for some thematic content where the line break is part of the content. Think about poetry, right? That's a good place for breaks. WBR is when you don't want the child elements to be considered part of the rest of the text. It's kind of a strange element. I haven't really used it very much at all. Don't use break to separate thematic groups in a paragraph. That's really not a for. If they're supposed to be separate paragraphs, make them separate paragraphs. That's what that's for. That's about break. ABVR is replacing the acronym element from previous HTMLs. You don't use that anymore. Just use ABVR. And so that's for the abbreviation or acronym. You can add a child title element to provide the expansion for that abbreviation or that acronym. All right, so insert, delete, and S. This is strike through. Strike through is really only meant for sarcastic strike throughs, right? Where you want the words to be seen and there, but you don't really mean them to be there. It's like the old caret H that we used to see in email years ago. But this is all about tracking changes, indicating insertions, deletions, and strike through. Small is not just to make text smaller. This is not what it's for anymore. It is used for less important text that is purposefully de-emphasized, right? So think about like the small print, disclaimers or caveats to the rest of your content. That's what small is for. It's not for block level content. It is part of a paragraph or part of something else. These are text level elements. Brand new ones, time. Time is a brand new element for HTML5. It's used to mark up date and time in a machine-readable way, but it also lets you provide a reader usable way through the value attribute. So you can have it say 4 p.m., but it'll be 2009-12-2521:54, the whole official format, because this is time and date are used for when you need JavaScript to do things with your page or do other things, machine purposed things, but it's here, there, and handy for citations or revision markup in a page. Time is really, really good for that. Ruby, RT, and RP, these are containers for Ruby text. Ruby text is annotations in Chinese and Japanese, so you may see them, you may not. Span, like div, has no semantic meaning, but it can be used as a container that you can attach JavaScript and CSS for. In it is a wrapper, so it represents all of its child elements as well. Media elements, image, we all know image. Right? Use the alt attribute to describe it, and that is extremely useful for like the Google crawler. Brand new element is canvas. This is a JavaScript created image. We could do a whole session just on canvas all by itself. Canvas can either show a static image where you can then manipulate the pixels. You can have a completely dynamically generated image. You can have a complex animated thing where you're redrawing the canvas on every frame and you get a game. I'm sure we've all seen those like that. Map is old. It's the image map, and area shows either the active area of the image map or a dead area. All right. Other media elements. These are new. Video source, audio source, and track. They work essentially the same way. The audio and video things work essentially the same, only audio plays audio and video does video, obviously. The interface will be a little bit different, but they're essentially the same. You have automatically added controls. You can loop. You can autoplay. You want to give the type of the video, and you can have fallback information about video. We've done a lot of fighting with video here at Single Sourcing, keeping the videos up, and we ended up putting everything on YouTube. So if you're looking for videos for this session today, look there. Because not all video happens the same way for all browsers. This is the new browser wars of the current and future. Fallback is essential, and what works in Chrome doesn't work in a lot of other places. Also, the track attribute, the track element here at the bottom, this is the subtitles, transcriptions, and similar text-based tracks that go with audio or video. It's a child of either one. The work on the track element is ongoing through the various standards and working groups. But this is where it will go when it's all complete and everybody is supporting it. Form controls. There are some differences in form controls, although let's go through some of the basics first. Form is something that allows the page to submit data. I've included here the difference between get and post. Sometimes it seems the same, but they're different. Get is like a complicated URL where you've got all the parameters in a row. A get URL is something that you can pass to anybody, and it will not have any side effects, right? So you can do the post, do the get. You'll get a crazy URL in the URL bar that you can then copy and paste and send to somebody else, and they can do it completely independent of anything else that was in the page. On the other side, post sends extra data in a non-visible way as part of the HTTP request, right? So this is something you use when you want side effects. You're changing things in a database, or you're trying to do something else. That's the difference between them. The select attribute, this is an input. This is a form control. This is a select element. Lets you pick one choice out of many. It's usually presented as a drop-down list. And the children are options and option group. Option groups lets you group things together. You can give a label to the group so that whoever is using your form can see what the grouping means. Input. This is the biggest one, form control. These are all classic HTML inputs. There's text, there's password, checkbooks, radio, file, submit, and button, which is basically the same as hidden. Everything has a name and a value. You use this to construct the data set. Text area is not input, but it's kind of like a beefy version of input text, which is why I put it on this page. But there are new inputs that are part of HTML5. Type date. This is a date picker. Gives you a little calendar box, and somebody can actually pick a day out of the thing. There's a time picker also that lets you pick times, but it also lets you pick a time and date. You can sort of group them together. You can pick a week. You can pick a month. All of these things are really handy for anybody doing credit card processing, right? Why are we all entering all of those values in every time? We're all doing the same thing. There's a color picker that will let you pick web-safe colors. There's a range to give you a slider. If you want somebody to pick a number between 1 and 5 and they want to only be able to pick whole numbers, that's the step. So the step is 1, the min and max 1 and 5. Number is the same, only it just allows numbers. So like your range slider could be, I want to pick colors from red to purple, and the colors jump by a color. Seems weird. But your range could be, I want fruit from apples to bananas, and my step is this. Your range can kind of be really anything. It's not necessarily numbers. But if you make it number, it's a value that has numbers. You can set min and max and a step. Type, there's new types. There's a telephone type, a URL, and an email so that you can automatically do form validation, which is really handy because everybody's doing the same things. Telephones always look the same. URLs always look the same. Email always look the same. So why is everybody writing the same code over and over again? Why not just put it in the spec, and that's what they did. You should know not all of these inputs are supported by all browsers. So these are things you should check before you use them and how they are working. Form controls, here's some other ones. These are not very commonly used, although at least the second one should be. Field set and legend. These are things to group things thematically, and legend lets you give a label to the field set. It's grouping elements. Label is extremely important. It actually is a special feature. If you use labels, when somebody clicks the label, it'll transfer the click to the associated input. Think like a whole bunch of little tiny checkboxes that might be hard for someone to navigate and move the mouse to check exactly the one they want. If you have a label, they click the label, and it will transfer the click to the box. That one's really handy. Data list, in input, it'll give you a drop-down. Like it uses the option child elements, and it'll give you autocomplete as you type. Isn't that handy? Placeholder is, it lets you supply a value to any of the input fields. You want to use title attribute for longer hints, or label to describe the input if you're not using title or placeholder. Form validation is new with HTML5. It's not yet supported everywhere, but it can be faked with JavaScript shims. Emails and URLs, those are obvious ones, and that's why those are added to the spec, but you might have other things where you want validation before somebody's allowed to submit it. You have like password fields where you require one character, one non-character, one capital letter, blah, 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 right? You want to be able to do that validation. It's supposed to be attribute pattern. Pattern will take a regex so that you can specify how the thing should be validated. Required means it's required before the form can be submitted. Much easier now to require that with just an attribute. There is also an invalid pseudo class that you can tweak with CSS. So if somebody does something wrong, you can have something happen. And the thing with form validation, it is continually checking. It is not just done at submit time. It's done as they go and as they're using it. Okay, so moving on to other things. I know there's a lot here. Embedding elements. There's a frame and an object. Object is multi-purpose, but it's kind of a hard one to use. It's really clumsy to use this because you can expose a lot of APIs. It's pretty much only used for Flash at this point. iframe, I've got the two ways to go from one frame to the other right there in the window. You should know that the pages are not, that the CSS and JavaScript do not percolate between the pages, but you can push things back and forth if you go through use JavaScript to go through the properties and reach the different frames. Tables should be used for tabular data. These are not for layout anymore because it confuses screen readers. This is the big key. CSS is anyway more powerful and should be used for that purpose. You've got various things that the tables hasn't really changed other than the thematic understanding, semantic reason of why you use tables. One of the things that's new in HTML5 is microdata annotations. You're able to add custom vocabularies, but you've got to define those vocabularies so you can add semantics to data that is already on your page. For example, say you want people and positions and organizations and more information about who and what is included. Think about events or reviews. Every review has a star value. It also has a who wrote it and the content of the review. Adding your own custom vocabulary can make it more readable to the search engines and certainly make it, they know what to do with it. You can look at Google's rich snippet program if you want to understand more about how microdata annotations work. So CSS, the other third of HTML5, this is really a cheat sheet of sort of how it all works. Selector versus class. A selector is preceded by a hash character, and it's like an ID. It's the thing given that name. And a class selector is preceded by the period. So you have this and that. I see we're getting close to time. It's close. I'm getting to the end anyway. Selectors can be combined. They can be grouped, so you don't have to require IDs, and you can give everybody new names. There are new selectors. You can specify a selector based on the attribute. So down here, input type equals text. So these attributes only apply to those kind of inputs, which is really handy. There's also more specific targeting, where the nth row, nth child, even rows versus odd rows get different behaviors. So you get different colors in a table. The heading 2's first child. You can do heading 2 plus header plus div text, right? Or div text child div. So there's new ways of getting to exactly the thing that you want and doing behavior on it, changing its formatting. These are the groups of CSS properties. I'm going to mention at the bottom a WebKit. WebKit is Chrome only, really. Mozilla does things its own way. It does it through Gecko. So be careful if you use any of the extensions. One of the other properties that's brand new is the ability to have web fonts. You give it a source URL and you can find, and it'll pull the Google web font or wherever directly into your page, which is also really nice if you're very, very concerned about web font and branding. Some JavaScript stuff. These are new things in HTML5. There's real-time communication. JavaScript libraries for web workers and web sockets. There's brand new file access APIs and file system APIs to do native drag and drop for upload and download. Anybody who had to do this in the past, it was a big pain in the neck and you had to write it all yourself. And now it's all there. Most browsers are implementing this. Device orientation. Think about your tablet. Is it oriented portrait or landscape? These are calls that the browser can get through JavaScript API. Speech input, geolocation. Geolocation, share your location or share to get the user's location. Modernizer, I got a little mention of it here. Modernizer is a JavaScript library that you can use. It's public domain, it's free, and it's got a lot of nice support for geolocation things. Make sure, here's the last note I'm going to say about JavaScript, put your script calls at the end so your response time is better. It lets the DOM build itself first, and then it doesn't drag down the page loading as long as the script calls are at the end. This is the last piece of HTML5, and we are right on the edge. Local storage is brand new. Think about how your webmail works if you use Yahoo or Gmail. There, you can put a whole database on the client side that you can access while they're on your page, and it persists. Even if they close the browser and go away, they come back, it's still there for you to access. It's different from cookies. Cookies are always transmitted to the server. They're just key-value pairs. The database local storage solution is never transmitted to the server. It only exists on the client machine, but it can be used to drive things on the page. And it's implemented natively in the browsers, so you don't have to worry about if I got a Mac client or a PC client. Here's a list of resources, places to go. I'm going to thank Tab Atkins from Google for his HTML5 PDS at San Francisco Bay ACM. He'll be back again soon. There's a great section there and dive into HTML5. It's free. It's on the web. All of these are free. There's an HTML5 boilerplate system where you can start right away with that as a starting point to build whatever project you're building with. There's also a nice HTML and JavaScript modernizer, as I said, modernizer stuff you can use. And there's cheat sheets for JavaScript, and there's CSS tutorials, and a whole lot of other resources, and these are all really good for use. All right. Do we have any questions? I know that was fast, but there's a lot to cover, and I really didn't even catch half of it.
There's no questions. I think we should have a pop quiz.
I think so. Well, I know it was a lot to cover, and I was going really, really fast. I see one. Well, I see somebody who's got a hand raised. Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. That wasn't a question. That was a comment.
Well, good. So, well, the video will be up on YouTube sometime soon, but this is really just a place to start. There's a great, I'll put another URL up there actually that I completely forgot to put up. It's slides at html5rocks.com, and it's just, it shows you everything, but it is heavy Chrome oriented, so it shows a lot of the WebKit stuff, which is not available to everybody else. All right.
And that should go up sometime today or tomorrow, yep. the slides. Okay, so folks, the next TC Dojo this month is going to be the Arbortext edition.
That's right.
You're going to cover this one.
So let's cover this, yes.
Yeah.
So our next open session for Dojo in June, John Hedke is scheduled to talk about creating documentation plans. When you've got distributed teams and fragmented documents, when you think about data, doc plans are extremely essential, and he's the master of remote and distributed teams, and he's going to talk about how to make really effective, good documentation plans. That's Monday, June 9th. This month, we're going to do XLIF and Styler, how to localize your style sheets. It takes 30 minutes to do, and unlike today's session, it's really done in 30 minutes. We'll show you how to set your style sheets up for localization and get your generated text strings and make your style sheet support multiple languages in 30 minutes or less. It's really kind of good.
Fun.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Our next Master Series is Tuesday, May 27th. The Master Series is a group of peers, kind of like when you get together at a conference and you're talking about what's real and what's important to you. It's the same group of people every month, and it's all about you and what's important to you, not necessarily what's important to us. Make sure you vote for upcoming session topics at the survey below, and let us know if there's anything you want to see that we haven't covered. Thanks
or presenters you want to hear from.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we love guest presenters. So, all right, great.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.